Welcome, Arsmaris. We were just catching up here for a second, so I'm glad to see you're in here. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Hi. Okay, I'm going to mute you all for just a little bit, and then we'll see you in a bit after we cover some content. Okay, and then as always, the chat box is available. So if anything is happening, feel free to click on that chat. Let me know that something's happening, and I will try to fix it if I can. Let's see. Okay, so this week we are going to be going over delivery. And as you know, last week we kind of took a step back to make sure that we had really solid scripts ready to move forward with. So I'm kind of combining a lot of delivery information into one presentation today. So we'll have a lot to cover. But to start, I really wanted to take a moment and make sure that you all are comfortable with where you are at right now with your scripts. And so I know, Fatima, you just mentioned you used a bit of your script, maybe a little bit different of a variation of it, but on Monday, sounds like that was going well. But I'm going to just unmute you all again. I should have handled that. And I just would like to get a sense of how confident you are and how you feel about your pitch right now with where it's at. So, Arsmaris, why don't we start with you? How do you feel about your pitch right now? Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, no problem. Well, I'm glad to hear about your meeting and that it went so well and that you're able to start using parts of your pitch already. So that's a good sign. And then, of course, we'll continue to develop it as we work forward over the next couple of weeks. How about you, Fatima? How do you feel about your script and where you're at right now? Great. How about you, Fernanda? Yeah, no, great. No, it definitely your script that you posted today is a great start. Had lots of data, had lots of the facts that we need built into it. But I would, as you said, just build in some sort of story so that we can connect better with your audience. And then we really need to refine your call to action, I think. But I think that you're taking steps in the right direction, and so far it looks great. So yeah, this week just make sure we build in that story and kind of refine that call to action. Okay, so moving forward, why don't we? I want you to just think for a minute about how confident you feel and whether delivery, when it comes to delivery, whether or not fear of public speaking is a big issue for you. So we're going to come back to that, but that's going to really kind of drive where we focus our most attention today. And I'm hoping that we can kind of just brush through a lot of that, but if we need to dive into some exercises to kind of work on fear and handling those stress and anxiety in that moment, we will definitely do that. So when I get to that point, I will be asking, so just make sure you take a moment to think about your level of fear when it comes to public speaking. Now, aside from going over public speaking and the fears that are around that, today we're going to talk about confidence, what drives confidence, what those fears are that do get in the way, the difference between practicing and rehearsing, and then we're going to dive in deep into script editing. And so again, script editing was the thing that we were going to cover last week, but we're going to kind of build that into this week. So script editing, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with some more homework as well. So this week will be a very big week, again, because you'll have to make sure that your script is getting refined, that it is edited for delivery notes, and that you start rehearsing. So next week I really hope to see videos and seeing you standing up and rehearsing your pitch scripts. So that's really exciting. Now, delivery for now. When it comes to delivery, an effective presentation, in order to have that effective presentation, everything has to sort of align. All of the various elements of your presentation. So we've been going over each of these elements and building on top of them. But your content, and now your tone, your body language, that narrative structure from your story, and the next week even your slide design, everything, all of those bits have to be in sync, or your presentation will feel disjointed. The audience will receive mixed signals about the overall message of your presentation, and it won't flow. So we have to make sure that while we're focusing on delivery, it's from the perspective of what works for you and your presentation and your audience. No one way of delivering is going to fit each of you and your personalities and what you're trying to relay. So you have to, again, approach that delivery from the perspective of what works for your message, your audience, and that single goal that we're driving them to. You're responsible for, making sure that you're presenting a cohesive message that is aimed at getting the results you want. Now, that being said, there are 3 problems that seem to be consistent across those that are delivering pitches. Now, each of your delivery styles are going to differ, but these are common problems and challenges that each of you will likely face. The first one is going to be the lack of confidence. And unfortunately, when you lack confidence, it does show. The next one is going to be the fact that you don't know your pitch well enough. If you're reading from your slides, if you're forgetting parts of your pitch, if you're getting thrown off easily, or you're not comfortable deviating from your script, that becomes a problem. You have to know your pitch in and out. And the third problem is that you've practiced when in reality you should have been rehearsing. And we'll discuss the difference. But when you step on stage, everything is different in the world. All of a sudden, you're not prepared for the setting, you weren't prepared for the audience, you're used to just speaking, to yourself or to your dog or to your friends, and you have to be prepared mentally for the setting that you're actually stepping into. So, do these 3 problems, lacking confidence, not knowing your pitch well enough, and practicing instead of rehearsing, do those sound familiar to you? And if so, which of these is the biggest problem for you? So go ahead in that chat box, let me know, of these 3 problems that have to do with delivery, which of these is likely affecting you the most? Which of these is the biggest problem for you? Great. Okay, so let's see. We're going to start with lacking confidence. The thing about confidence is that if you feel prepared, you'll often feel more confident. But that's not the only thing that comes into play. This is one of my favorite quotes. I think we've actually had it before, but it's by Mark Twain, and he says, "There are two types of speakers, those that are nervous and those that are liars." Now, I love this quote because it's a reminder that it's okay to be nervous. Even the finest of speakers do get nervous. But it's how you deal with those feelings that really matters. So I want you to think about how you feel when you step on stage or step in front of a big meeting to present. I want you to think about what goes through your mind. You get that rush of adrenaline, but maybe your stomach feels like it's turning upside down. You begin to sweat. Your heart feels like it's about to beat out of your chest. Maybe your mouth gets really dry. Your cheeks start to flush. I get really red sometimes. And maybe some of you even develop nervous tics, a bouncing knee, a twitching foot, biting your nails, blinking too rapidly, often speaking too quickly. These are really common, and those flight or fight reactions are perfectly normal. But in the moment, they're rather embarrassing because all you're thinking about is the fact that you want to really nail that pitch or that presentation in that moment. So think of which of those results of anxiety are really present with you. And then take a step back and think about what triggers those fear. Think about what triggers that action. What are you afraid of in that moment? What is triggering your fear? What fears do you need to overcome? Maybe it's not knowing what to expect, fear of the unknown. Maybe it's the thought of failing, the anticipation of failure. Maybe it's that you worry about what people think of you or what they think about your business. Whatever it is, I want you to acknowledge what actually triggers your fear and then think about it for a moment. Because the reality is, none of those fears are serious. None of them are life-threatening. And more often than not, they're actually pretty common and super manageable. It's just the fact that you have to think about, why am I anxious right now? Why am I afraid? And then putting that into the right context. So, when it comes to managing those fears, here are a few things we can do to minimize those physical reactions to fear. By far, number one is practice. The more comfortable you are with your content, the less you will worry. Richard Branson himself actually admits that he was never particularly one to enjoy public speaking, and that his way of becoming less nervous, and like Richard Branson, he never seems nervous. Like, he always looks just super cool, right? But his way of becoming less nervous was just to practice a ton. So you're going to practice a ton too. Next, we're going to visualize our delivery. Getting comfortable with the thought of, a crowd. Maybe it's a stage that you're going to be standing on. Maybe it's bright lights that you're not used to. Whatever you're going to be met with, you want to make sure that you're visualizing that. And if at all possible, practicing in an environment that's similar. Next is slow, deep breathing. Last week, or the week before maybe, we were talking about storytelling techniques, and a lot of the techniques that we discussed were those that were documented by Nancy Duarte. And Nancy Duarte swears by 2 minutes of slow, deep breaths before she presents. So just slow, deep breaths a couple minutes before you present allows you to just calm your mind and refocus. Then there's power pose. Now, and in the content section, I've actually linked to this TED video so that you guys can go watch it. But the power pose is by Amy Cuddy. The TED Talk is by Amy Cuddy anyway. And she talks about how body language really shapes who you are. But this power pose is one that she suggests you do in any moment where you really need to bring that extra level of confidence. And I know Fatima was just mentioning before we started class today that she had a presentation on Monday, and she actually did the power pose before going into delivering her pitch, which was just ironic and incredible. But the power pose is, standing up like Superman, arms on your hips, and she suggests just going into a bathroom stall and just standing there, chest open, hands on hips, Superman pose. That's the power pose. And it causes you to build confidence. It builds builds up on endorphins and just kind of really gets you motivated to deliver your pitch. And I would highly recommend watching that TED Talk because she goes into the science and the details of why the power pose really works. Another way of managing fear is to watch funny videos before your pitch. It sounds really funny, but you want to lighten up the mood. And this is a technique used by a couple of people. I know James Altucher often talks about how before he gives big presentation, he goes and watches funny YouTube videos or comedy skits. And he actually has a blog on his website of all the funny comedy skits that he likes to watch. And it's because it takes your mind off of the nervousness. It takes the mind off of what you're about to do. It's lighthearted. It makes you laugh. It makes you smile. And it really gets you in the right mindset to be able to deliver a pitch with confidence. So consider watching funny videos as well. The other thing you can do is before you're stepping on stage, a lot of times there's like a networking session an hour before, or maybe it's just in passing if you're, depending on the setting. But if you can meet people that are going to be sitting in that room before you have to present, it helps remind you that they're just people like you. It helps give you a friendly face in the audience. And that's a really powerful thing as well. And the last thing I'll say about managing fear is just to make sure you have a glass of water nearby. Because if you do have those physical responses to fear, a lot of times it's a scratchy voice, a dry mouth, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with pausing to take a drink of water and resetting. And these are all very doable. You don't have to do them all, but they're a couple, pick a couple. Obviously, you're going to practice a lot and you're going to visualize. Pick a couple of these ways that you can make sure that you're able to maintain and manage the fear that's going to come on before you deliver your presentation. But all very doable, I think. Now, confidence is a number of things. It's how you internally deal with confidence, and that's what we just talked about, is how to deal with the internal issues that surround confidence and how they show themselves physically. But these are ways that externally you're able to affect confidence, but rather the perceived level of confidence, right? The way the audience feels, how confident they think you are. You absolutely need to smile. Smile is something that you can only do when you're comfortable. People can spot a fake smile. It's clear as day when somebody's faking a smile. But if you can smile and relax and be natural about it, that exudes confidence. Pausing and being comfortable in pause is another way to appear confident. You want to keep eye contact. It is super common in a moment, particularly when you have a pitch memorized, a moment of thought, if you've lost your train of thought or if you're trying to think of something, it is so common. I do this all the time as well. It's a habit I'm trying to break. It is so common to just instinctively look down. And in that moment, you just break eye contact to think, and then you come back to the audience once you have an answer. And that feels right, it feels natural, but it is not the right thing to do. Breaking confidence or breaking eye contact is a way to show a moment of weakness, a moment where you lack confidence. If you're able to keep eye contact and just pause while you think for what you're missing or think for your answer. It is so much more powerful, and it has so much more built-in confidence, perceived confidence. So we're going to make sure that we try our hardest to keep eye contact. Ask a question. Now, asking a question allows you to appear confident, but it's actually a bit of a trick, because in a moment where anxiety is really high, if you just stop for a second and ask a question, it does a couple of things. One, it gives you a break to breathe. Literally, just breath so that you can calm down. Two, it removes the focus from you and allows the audience to, for a moment, pay attention to either their response mentally to that question or to someone physically answering your question in the audience. Either way, it removes the attention from you for a brief moment. So if you're getting overwhelmed, find a moment where you can ask a question and pause. The other thing you need to do to show that you have confidence is don't be afraid to address the distractions in the room. A lot of times, when people try to just continue on and act like it's not a problem, but let's say that there's a big bunch of racket going on in the room next to you. Maybe you're next door to a break room where people are hollering, or it's maybe it's a conference where there's multiple rooms next to each other, and the room next to you is being very loud. They're cheering for something. There was a moment where being loud was okay for their side of the room, right? But if you continue to talk through that, you've lost control of the room. They're all thinking, oh, what's going on over there? Oh, why is that noise happening? Who's that? What am I missing? They're all thinking about that noise and unable to focus on your message. So what you have to be able to do is, in full confidence, stop. Maybe even mention the noise. Like, oh man, they're having fun over there, aren't they? And give it a moment so that you can draw the attention back to you and your message. Because if you continue to talk through major distractions, they're not thinking about what you're saying in that moment. They're thinking about the distraction. Everybody in the room has to be saying, oh man, that's really noisy. Oh man, what are they doing over there? And if you hear it, they hear it. So just remember that and know that it's okay to address that distraction, to go off script, and then regain control of the room. You're also never going to apologize. And this is, particularly with women, it's a natural tendency. Let's say your slides aren't coming up as quickly as you thought, or your mic wasn't working. A lot of times people will be like, oh, sorry about that, or oh, sorry, give me just a moment, my slides, or sorry about that, I've got to do this really quickly, And it's a natural thing, but then you lose control of that moment. You have to approach things as understanding that the audience generally doesn't even know that there was a mistake or there was something that you were working out. They're just waiting, as they were before you stood on stage, for you to start your pitch or your presentation. So no matter how strong the urge, avoid apologizing. Don't admittedly start your pitch with you doing something wrong. And remember that the audience actually wants you to succeed. They're sitting there listening to you. They signed up to spend time listening to you. And if you keep that in mind and remember, like, this audience is here to hear from me, this audience wants to learn from me, this audience wants to hear what I do, that'll allow you to stand in more confidence. Now, how do we feel about confidence right now? I'm going to, let's just pull open this chat window here. Let me know how you feel about confidence. Do you feel like confidence is something that you can overcome? Is it something that you feel you can manage? It's something that it's going to be it's always going to be a work in progress. You have to get comfortable with delivering your message. And it's never going to be something that's just going to exist, right? The more familiar you are with your message, the more experienced you are speaking, that's all going to help you build more and more confidence. And it comes with time. And, it's not going to happen overnight. But if we're as prepared as we can be, then we're giving ourselves the best chance to stand in confidence. Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to take years, and practice does build confidence. That's a great point. So for now, I'm gonna continue past confidence, and we can come back and I can post some other things that kind of help with building confidence. But what I want to make sure we do is address a couple of other things around delivery. So we're going to start with the fact that you don't know your pitch well enough. This is often a problem, mostly because people assume that they do know their pitch well enough. You have to be able to tell your story without reading it, and most of you know that, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I've got my pitch memorized, I'm good to go. And that's great, because we don't want you to be dependent on or even held to a script, right? But it goes beyond that. I believe that there are 3 phases of pitch familiarization. The first one, admittedly, your pitch just kind of stinks. You're often hiding behind the lectern. You're, uncomfortable with your own words. Maybe you need your notes. You're not getting to your point quickly. You're kind of dancing around your message, right? The next one, you're kind of like a robot. You really know your stuff, but you deliver it word for word without any personality. There's no natural movement. There's no tone variation. It all just starts to sound the same to the audience. And then lastly, you're kind of a master. You're a ninja of your content. You're able to move and flow based on the circumstances around you. And maybe they don't even see what's coming because you've gotten so confident at delivering things in a way that's exciting. Right? So there's these phases, and you kind of have to work through them. And so a lot of times, we're standing in the first phase where we're not quite comfortable with our message. We're still held to a script. But we want to even get past the robot phase and be so amazingly comfortable with our content that we're able to change how it's presented without being taken off track. Now, the only way to move through these phases is with practice. I'm a huge fan of Winston Churchill. He's obviously recognized as one of the greatest orators of all time. But even Churchill only achieved his status after a lot of hard work. And in his memoirs, he claimed that he averaged 1 hour of preparation for every 1 minute of speech. So if you think about that, he would speak anywhere, from 30, 45, 60 minutes at a time. Well, that's 30, 40, 60 hours of preparation and practice that he would put into just one speech. And we're no better. I wouldn't say that I compare to someone at the Winston Churchill level. So there's no reason why I shouldn't be focusing and committing to put the time into practice as well. Now, I'm saying practice, and practice is very, very important. However, you need to not just practice, but to rehearse. Now, we're taking practice one step forward, further with this, right? This is a great quote. It says, some people fear that too much rehearsal undermines spontaneity and authenticity. Actors know the opposite to be true. Having your material internalized actually frees you to live in the moment. Now, before performing, stage actors, they often get 6 weeks, 5 to 6 days per week, 8, 10 hours per day to rehearse. And that's how you end up looking natural and assured and authoritative and confident. You need to practice until you not only know the content, but feel comfortable with the body language and the tone, everything that goes into your delivery. So you're wondering what's the difference, right? What's the difference between practicing and rehearsing? Well, during rehearsal, I want you to pay attention to a couple of things. You're going to work on things like a conversational tone. You're going to work on your pace, not speaking too fast. You're going to focus on your vocal variation, making sure that you're not monotone. You're going to try to really feel the words, like savor them, make sure that you're enunciating them properly. Right? You're going to monitor your energy level. Often we start out strong and passionate, but it's not easy to keep that level of energy high. So you want to pay attention to your energy level. And when rehearsing, there's a couple of rules that we're going to put into place. The first one is that you have to be standing. You should never practice sitting down. You're not going to be delivering sitting, in most cases, or you shouldn't be. So I want you to stand tall. Your body and your voice, everything works differently when you're standing. Your energy level, your gestures, all of that changes. So you need to practice, you need to rehearse your pitch while standing. The second one is that gestures are exaggerated. We're going to talk heavily about gestures in just a second, but I want you to just know that when rehearsing, this is a moment of discovery. So go big, look silly. This is how you find the line of what is natural and what's effective in terms of movement with your words. Rehearsal is for figuring out what works. So make everything big and then just feel it and see, where to actually take it from there. During rehearsal, pauses are intense. Often during rehearsal, people skip over the pauses because they're like, oh, I know the content, I know to pause here, move on, right? And you're trying to save yourself time. But it's absolutely so important that you rehearse the pause. Pauses, you want to feel how long is necessary. You want to understand and pay attention to what you're doing during that pause. It creates this suspense, even just a second. Creates suspense and it allows them to kind of reflect on the point you just made. But often that can be thrown off if you're not making the right facial expression or if you didn't hold the gesture. You don't want to break your own pause. So you have to think through not only the pause, but how long and what you're doing in that pause. So we're going to exaggerate and make our pauses very intense. We're going to move with intention. This is one of those things that even really good speakers struggle with. You normally see two extremes, two opposites. You'll see that people who are not comfortable with moving or haven't practiced moving, they'll grasp onto the lectern. They're standing behind the mic and they don't move. They just stand in one place the entire time, right? And then there are the people who are telling themselves, yeah, use the stage, move, and they're thinking freely and they're thinking that they're moving. There's always this rules oh, you have to make sure that you go to each side of the stage and look at the different sides of the audience, and people think those through. But unfortunately, a lot of times that ends up looking like or being you just pacing unnecessarily on stage just to make the point that you made the movement, right? We don't want to pace on stage. It distracts from the message. Instead, in your script, and we'll go through this, you actually need to plan movement. You need to say, okay, I'm going to stand in this corner of the stage to represent this point, and then the opposite side of the stage to represent this point. Or maybe you're moving to 3 different places to separate 3 points. Maybe you're acting out the fact that there's a huge bridge somewhere, so you're gesturing and you build a bridge on stage and you cross that bridge, right? People can remember what you're saying better if you visually provide them space, visual separation for ideas. So you want to approach your pitch with what can I do with the space that I have, and how can I move with intention to support what I'm saying. Now, when you're making a point, it also needs to land, though. So on the opposite side of that, we have to make sure that we're not moving with intention as well. When you're landing a big point, you want to make sure that it lands and that you land with it. Your feet should be planted. If I'm making a big point, right before it, I'm standing there, I'm locking my eyes somewhere, and then I'm doing nothing but saying those words, because you want nothing distracting from that message, that moment, right? Any kind of movement could lighten the importance of what you said, or distract from it, or take away from how intense you wanted it to be. So never walk or move while landing a big statement. Rule number 5 is we're going to transition away from your notes. Obviously, in rehearsal, we're going to work our way away from our script. Number 6 is we want to simulate the conditions of your presentation as much as possible. And by this I mean mostly your setting. So you want to ask people wherever you're going to be presenting next, or pitching next, speaking. You want to understand what that setting looks like. And then at some point of rehearsal, you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in the same conditions, similar setting. If you're going to be speaking on stage, get to the point where you know everything, and then go practice on a stage. Go rent one, go borrow one, go, however you need to do that. If it's going to be a small room with a table in it, go speak in a small room with a table. By doing that, you're better preparing yourself, familiarizing yourself with your motion, your movement, the technology, getting all of those hurdles out of the way. And the 7th rule of rehearsal is to record yourself. Recording yourself is the best way to see what you need to practice even more. So we're going to make sure that when we're rehearsing our pitch, that we are recording ourselves, and then looking back at the things that we need to work on, pauses, gestures, movements, intentions, tone, all of these things, and making sure that they're how you want them to be. Now, we're going to dive deep a little bit into gestures more specifically. Because you really need them to be thought out. Much like the movement we discussed, gestures should be intentional. Your words can be helped or they can be hurt by your body language, by your gestures, by your facial expressions. And unfortunately, nervous mannerisms, like we were talking about before, those things that come out of your fear, those tics, they can be trouble. If you're rocking your body, if you're tugging at your clothes or adjusting your glasses, those again just distract the audience away from the message. So a lot of times when you start rehearsing, even if it's not nervous tics, you'll end up doing the same physical gesture repeatedly, just because it's a natural gesture to you. But that's a problem as well, because then it starts to look like a nervous tic because you're doing it repeatedly, and then it's distracting as well. So we're going to plan and practice gestures and make sure that they're gestures of value. We're going to make sure that they're gestures that come natural to you and your style, but that are delivered with purpose. And you also want to make sure they're not gestures that can be offensive. You'd be surprised how often gestures naturally flow from people that can be taken as offensive. So the 4 types of gestures we have here. The first one is a descriptive gesture. Now these are ones that make your words more clear. So maybe it's to show the size of something and you spread your arms out to show the size. Maybe it's to illustrate the shape, so you're drawing a square or a circle. Maybe it's the location, so you're pointing. Most often you should never be pointing, but using a full hand. So maybe it's your palm facing, pointing in a direction. Right? So descriptive, meaning that they're making what you're saying more clear by showing it. There's empathic gestures. These are ones that are really strong emotional gestures. It's like shaking a fist in the air when you're angry. It's, throwing your fists next to your body when you're throwing a fit, kind of thing. They're emotional gestures that people can relate to. Suggestive gestures, they're ones that allow you to imply something without saying words. A lot of times, suggestive gestures, like shrugging your shoulders to show that whatever you said was really in just irony. Or kind of, a question with like, oh yeah, who knows, and then you're shrugging your shoulders. They're suggestive. They're implying something without you having to say something. And then there's prompting gestures. Prompting gestures are, if you want the audience to raise their hand, you raise your hand, big, proud, strong. Right? So prompting gestures, you're prompting the audience to do something. These are the 4 types of gestures that I want you to do. If at all possible, you should not be doing gestures unless they are one of these gesture types and unless you have intention with your gesture. So keep those in mind because we're going to mark up the scripts with these gestures and you're going to need to just make sure that you're staying within these parameters. So it really is going to become part of your script, the motion, the movement, the pauses, the gestures, all of that. So next we're going to go deep dive into script editing. So just going to check in with you guys really quickly. Okay. Let me unmute you real quick. Are you guys good where you're at? Are we ready to jump into script editing? Any questions so far? No problem? Everyone's good to go? Okay. All right, so we're going to jump into script editing. Now, when you're first reading through your script, what I want you to do this week is you're actually going to take your script and print it out, if at all possible, because then we're going to mark it up. And when we're script editing, we want to have the intention of making things shorter where necessary, making them consistent, and making them impactful, making everything impactful. And so we're going to go through it and we're going to read it out loud to start. So you'll go through your entire script, reading it out loud multiple times, just getting comfortable with the flow of it, adding words. A lot of times when we write our scripts, we write them as we're supposed to read them, but that is not at all how things come out when they're said out loud. Maybe you want to repeat a word to emphasize it. Maybe you want to say a word that, started a sentence with and, even though it's not proper. That's okay. Write it down how you plan to say it. So we're going to read it out loud and adjust so that everything is written as if we say it. And then you're going to look at it and say, okay, like, are my verbs in the right tense? That is a very common thing to just naturally have incorrect. Are my verbs in the right tense? Are my takeaways very clear? Is there a logical order and flow? Do I have a really strong conclusion, like call to action, that's really going to move them to take that action? And then consider your audience. Are you repeating anything or saying anything that's obvious that they already know? Or are they going to be like, yeah, I know that? So make sure that you're not saying anything that I don't want to say it offends them, but anything unnecessary. So we're going to approach the script from that angle to start. Just cleaning up the script, making sure we're comfortable with what it says, how it says it, and that the script actually shows what I'll be saying out loud, right? Now, once you're comfortable with the content, that's when we start to mark up the script for present and delivery. Now, for this, Arsmaris, hopefully you don't mind, I took, I think, your first paragraph. Let's see, yeah. So we'll be kind of marking up and going through each of these with your pitch, at least a part of it. So here's the 3 things you're going to do to start once you're comfortable with your script. We're going to underline one word, generally one word, in a sentence that you want to place emphasis on. Normally, when you're saying a sentence, there is a word that you are going to emphasize, and by changing that word, it completely changes the tone or the meaning of that sentence. So you want to make sure that you know that you're not just saying a sentence, but that you know what emphasis you want to apply to that sentence. Next, we're going to place 2 lines. That's my gesture. If you want to write something else down, you can, but those 2 lines, the pause sign, we're going to place those pause lines between words where you want to pause. That is the first step to rehearsing our pauses. And then we're going to make notes of gestures, when we want to walk, where we want to stand. Draw an arrow from a word, box it and draw an arrow to it that says, right corner. And then draw another arrow that says moving or walk to left corner. We're going to do that. Okay? So let me see here. I'm actually going to move into, here we go. I'm going to unmute you all again. So if you need to mute yourself, feel free to do that. Okay. So for this first one, Arsamaris, I'm going to let you at least do the first couple, since it's your script. And we don't want to change what you're meaning for it to say. But we're going to start with one sentence at a time. And we're going to read that sentence out loud. So I'm going to start by reading the sentence, but then Arsamaris, I'm going to have you do it. And everyone can kind of do it to themselves as well. Actually, I'm going to unmute the rest of you so you can read out loud. Bear with me here. Let's see. Mute you. Okay. So everyone else is muted, but Arsamaris, I do have you unmuted. So I'll do the first one. You'll say, graduation is an exciting time for many students, but at the same time, it can be a daunting experience filled with uncertainty. And there's all kinds of pauses, even right there. I mean, that's a long sentence to start with, but you can see how pauses can change the sentence a lot. And also, I wasn't even sure where to place the emphasis for my first read. So for a minute, everyone go ahead and read that first sentence in your head and just see if you can find the word and where you want the emphasis to be. Now I'm going to read through it again and I'm going to show you how it changes. Actually, let's just start with the first before the comma. Graduation is an exciting time for many students. Or I can say, graduation is an exciting time for many students. Or I can say, graduation is an exciting time for many students. So you start to see how it changes based on where you place the emphasis. So, Arsamaris, just for that first part, where are you putting the emphasis? Okay, so graduation is an exciting time for many students. Something like that? Okay. Now I want you to read the second part and tell me where it goes. Yep. Yes. Yep. Daunting. Okay. So, let me see. But at the same time, it can be a daunting experience filled with uncertainty. It can be a daunting experience filled with uncertainty. Why don't you read it really quickly and place it on an uncertainty out loud? Yep. It's fine. You have to just kind of feel through the words. So I think you're right. It's let's see, but at the same time. So no emphasis goes on that phrase. That phrase has to be quick and that's like one thing. But at the same time, it can be a daunting experience. I almost feel like it's filled as like a pause there. But at the same time, it can be a daunting experience filled with uncertainty. And you see how you can just like lay it on there. So it just kind of depends on where you Yep, go ahead. Yeah, yeah, no, of course. Of course you can. So you're saying graduation is an exciting time for many students, but, and you're saying you're pausing there? Okay, yeah, no, great. But, so then what I would do is you can use pause or you can use comma or whatever is comfortable for you. I would say but, and there's kind of a pause there. At the same time, pause again. It can be a daunting experience filled with uncertainty. So you're kind of really pausing before it again, and then you just have to figure out how you want to emphasize which of the points is more important. I think you're going to kind of pause maybe a little bit after filled, um, or after experience, depending on how you're pacing it. But that's the thing, is like it's not super simple and it doesn't have to be one way. It's really what feels right for you, but we're going to dive deep into every single sentence this deep, and you're going to underline the word you want to emphasize, and you're going to draw pauses. If you don't mind, I know it's your script, but I'm going to have the others do a line really quickly. So I'm going to mute you. Fatima, are you able to be unmuted right now? No? Are you eating? you, you alright? That's okay. Sushi sounds yummy. Oh, didn't mean to. Okay, so I want you to take a stab with the next sentence. So the first thing you're going to do, now this again probably breaks up with that comma, but I want you to read that full sentence, starting with many and ending with career. Maybe just read it twice through and get comfortable with it. Yep. And just a side note, Arsamaris, I bet that you want to probably put something like the word often or something in there. They're often not, or there's probably something in there to kind of like put the right emphasis. But for now, go on the script. So Fatima, go ahead and read it one more time. So start with that first bit where it ends with job. Which word would you place the emphasis on? So kind of read through it and change the emphasis in your head and let me know where you would place it. And everyone else, make sure you're doing the same thing. Yep. Now read it again and place it on job. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it goes on challenging. Read it that way again. Perfect. Now let's do the second half of the sentence, same way. Mm-hmm. And you did a bit. You did do that a little bit, yeah. So I think so if you split that up again, of the ones that find a job, you're kind of emphasizing find, but not too heavily. I think you're emphasizing the word not. They are not in their preferred career. Or you can switch it to preferred and say they are not in their preferred career. And I think one of those two probably weighs the best. Read the full sentence and feel it out. Yeah, perfect. Perfect, perfect. Okay, let's switch. I'm going to mute you now. Fernanda, are you available? Perfect. Oh, I keep doing that. Okay, so you're going to take a stab at the next sentence. It says, we have a big problem that many are ignoring. Where do you think the emphasis goes there? Go ahead and read through it twice. Okay, read it with the emphasis where you think it should go. We have, let's see. Oh. There we go. We have a big problem that many are ignoring. We have a big problem. So between the two, I think it's either big or ignoring. Let's see. We have a big. I think it has to be big. We have a big problem. Maybe problem. We have a big problem that many are ignoring. It can go a number of ways. Where do you think it's best emphasized? Okay. Why don't we, that one was a short one. Why don't we do the next sentence as well? Read through that one for me. Yep. I think not. I think it is not. I think you're correct. Yeah. Okay. Arsamaris, I'm going to come back to you. Do you find this helpful, Arsamaris? Why don't, and not to say that you have to stick with the words that they chose, because obviously it's your pitch and it's how you will deliver it that matters. Why don't you just read through the full paragraph for me? Perfect. Now, what I'm going to show you now, and we could have done this, let's see. So the way that you read it, that's okay. Just let me know if we can't, if it doesn't fix itself here. But for the first part, you tell me which words to underline. So the first sentence to start. Graduation is an exciting time for many students. Where are we emphasizing? Of the first section, where are you placing this? The graduation is an exciting time. Where's the emphasis in that sentence? Okay. So what we would do is we would underline exciting. And I completely suggest that you do this with a pen and paper. So print out your pitch and do this manually. Just because it's easier, particularly for the first couple drafts. And then the next part, where would you emphasize? I think you'd have one in the second half of the sentence. That's okay. Daunting. Okay. And then you said challenging. And where else? I think you said not, right? No, that's okay. And the next sentence? Big. And then let's go through and think of pauses. Read through it and tell me where you would put a pause. Yeah, I think you put a really big pause here. Let them think about that. And then what about the next sentence? Here? Oh no. Yep. And then I think after career, you have a really big pause. I think so. So when I'm reading it, because I think you want that thought more because you want that statement to like sit with them for a second. So you're saying of the ones that find a job, they are not in their preferred career. Pause and just let them think about that. And then you're re-emphasizing. We have a big problem that many are ignoring. People are ending in jobs they are not passionate about. And then I think you have probably another, not as long, but a bit of a pause here on about. Does that make sense? So why don't we read through this again and then use those emphasis that we've underlined and use the pauses that we've drawn. Perfect. I think you plugged the word I think often in there. I think that was great. I think also just sidebar here. I think I think it should be landing in or let's see. People are or accepting jobs they are not passionate about. Something like that. Because I think ending in it makes it sound like I don't know. I feel like it's the wrong word. So I think that either people are accepting jobs they're not passionate about, or people are landing it. Yeah, exactly. Maybe it is you settling. People are settling for jobs they're not passionate about. Something along that lines. I think it can be a more powerful sentence that way. Okay. So I'm going to unmute you all again. So, collectively, do you feel that you're able to address your pitch and go through your pitch and do this pauses and emphasis? Does that all, any questions about that so far? Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but you have to read it out loud. It's the only way that you can find emphasis is when you read it out loud, and you can kind of feel where you naturally go. And a lot of times it'll force you to break up sentences. If there's commas and things like that, you can think of them as different sentences. So a lot of times what I end up doing is breaking up sentences with periods, even though it's not a full sentence. Like your first sentence as an example, I might have said graduation is an exciting time for many students, and I'd put a period there if I wanted, if that's how I was thinking. But at the you know what I'm saying, so you can just mark it up in a way that is how you would read it as opposed to proper. Don't worry so much about everything else. And then from there, let me read through it real quick and see if we can find some gestures. Graduation is an exciting time for many students, but at the same time, let's see. Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's that kind of stuff. So let's see, where is that? Here we are. So like we could say, okay, here you're gesturing, and it might be just you like bringing your hands like huge. That's definitely a great idea. You can also maybe slash through if you're trying to emphasize not. You could just draw a line diagonally across your body. Things like that. So I don't see any like where you would absolutely want to walk across. This is early in your pitch, so you're not making differing points yet. So we could do these, indications of big motions. And then we can also, if you plan on moving, a lot of times what I'll do if I plan on moving is I'll say, okay, like, this is the point I'm moving for. Oh, let's change the color. Hold on. We'll make this bright blue. So, and not that you will, but let's say that like here I wanted to like move across the room. I would do this, and then I would draw an arrow, and then I would, notate off line saying, okay, like you're going stage left, that kind of thing. And then you have this script that's not only words, but now it includes your gestures, your pauses, how you're emphasizing things, where you're moving on stage. And that's what I want each of you to do this week. So I'm going to pull back to our slides here. So for this week, what I'm going to have you do is edit your script. And by edit, I mean, for starters, just make sure it's the words that you want it to be. Each of you posted one in Facebook this week. Great start. So we're going to print those out or edit them and then print them. And then I want you to mark up your script with pauses, with emphasis, and with gestures. You can do that by hand and then take a picture of it with your phone, or you can do it online if you'd want. If you want to, do it with a pen and paper to start and then finalize it with a computer copy, that's fine, however you're comfortable. I want you to get that script. That script is the most important thing. And then I'd like you to post a video of yourself, reading that pitch with that emphasis and with those pauses, and if you can, with the gestures. So start getting used to doing that. So record yourself standing up and going through that script with those indications and emphasis and gestures. We'll provide feedback to one another. Yep, go ahead. You certainly can. So here's the thing. Then you're just doing it naturally with what you're reading, right? What you have to realize is that you're naturally going to read something however it comes out. That's not necessarily how you want it to be. So if I was reading yours and I didn't have any marks, so let me go back to one without marks so that I don't have any flags. I'm just going to read through this really quickly. Graduation is an exciting time for many students, but at the same time, it can be a daunting experience filled with uncertainty. Many students find it challenging to find a job. Of the ones that find a job, they are not in their preferred career. So what happens is you can only process so many words at a time as you're reading, and so you can only think in the context of those words that you see. So that changes when you do things with intention. So naturally, yes, you can read it and have someone mark where you're naturally doing things, but I guarantee you that you're going to want to change some of them, and you'll want to just practice reading. I would literally just sit at a desk and go sentence by sentence like we just did and say, okay, like next sentence, we have a big problem that many are ignoring. And then I would read it, and while reading it, place emphasis on every single word and feel which one makes the most sense. The other thing that I'll warn you though is sometimes doing it sentence by sentence isn't putting things in the context of your whole message. So maybe if I just read the sentence, we have a big problem that many are ignoring, and I just assume it goes on big, not to say that it doesn't. But that if you go back to the beginning and read the full thing through, it might change where the emphasis really needs to be, particularly when you're addressing things like this where you're giving contradicting ideas and you're balancing those two. So the emphasis often changes because you want to make sure that you're pointing to the differentials in those two statements. So yes, that's a great place to start, but then I want to make sure that you're testing that and making sure that you're trying other words with emphasis. Does that make sense? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, likely it would probably flow better if you did use a different job or a different word. Hold on. Let's see. I'm going to read that sentence. Many students find it challenging to find a job. Of the ones that find a job, they are not in the preferred career. Um yeah, you can say like of those that find one, or so like move the word one to jobs and move that ones to those. So of those that find one, they are not. That could work. And I think you're right, because then it helps put the emphasis of job, more on the first part. Yeah, in your pitch, I think there are a couple times where you use the same starter to sentences as well. I think according to Bloomberg Business, I think you say that twice. And you don't actually have to, you know, give credit to all of your facts. If it adds value, you can do that. But, you could just lighten it and say people are ending in jobs they're not passionate about. Among 22-year-old degree holders who found jobs in the past 3 years, more than half. And, just make it a fact. If they ask, if they want to know the source, like, fine, you have it. You don't necessarily have to say it. Yeah. But what it ends up doing is by saying according to Bloomberg Business, it actually takes it out of conversational tone and puts it back into like business jargon. So it can set a better tone by not saying that. But if you feel that it's required, if it's such a big statistic that maybe they won't believe it, or if you feel that it makes it a little more creditable, you can add it. But definitely, you're not going to say that twice. Yeah. Let's see, what else do we have here? Yeah, so you're going to give each other feedback, and then next week we're going to go over visuals, so slides. Now I know you all might not necessarily need slides in every pitch setting, but we're going to go through it. And so I want you to start thinking of visually what could represent what you're saying and how you would break it up. I'm going to say probably implement a 15 slide max rule. So just start thinking through that. That's okay. That's all right. Any other questions, though? Let's see. Let me get back here. Does everybody feel comfortable to do these things this week? Okay. Yep. The markups. Yep. I would absolutely suggest that. Feel free to, post versions along the way. We can kind of help you and get you feedback as we go. And know that your script's going to change. It's not going to stay the same, but you definitely want to make sure you have a good basis to start with. All right. Well, if everyone's good from here, that's all I had for this week. Really just wanted to, touch on fear and confidence and give you those tips. I'm going to post this to the recording and these slides to the Facebook group, because I think that some of this stuff that we went over, you might not have made notes about it, and it might be good to reference the types of gestures and things like that again. And if you need anything else throughout the week, you know where to find me. All right, everyone, have a great week. We'll talk soon. Bye.